Hey everyone, welcome to week 4 of the Footballguys Powergrid. A lot of questions this week. Where's the value? Where's Dan Bach? Why am I hosting? And who's this black screen down in the bottom? It's Ryan Hester. For those of you who don't know, Ryan Hester was a mainstay on this show for about 2 years. 2 years ago, 2019. And we're ready to jump into it. So happy to be here, ready to get started. Dan is on a little bit of a personal vacation type thing. He'll be back next week. John, kick us off to Vegas.
Yeah, Vegas, interesting week this week. You got a couple teams right on top, Buffalo and Kansas City. Josh Allen won all the money last week, and he gets to go up against one of the worst defenses in the league, and the Houston Texans at home. Their 32 points implied team total makes the Buffalo Bills really attractive this week. They're 17-point favorites. The only question there is if you're going to go with the big home favorites at the running back position, is it Devin Singletary or Zach Moss? We'll probably talk about that in the running back section. An away favorite, Kansas City at Philly, my hometown. They're 31 points implied team total. And, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is there. This is maybe a must-win situation for Patrick Mahomes. He's 1-2 in last place in the AFC West. Could be really interesting for the Chiefs this week. But there's one game or a couple games that I really like this week. The Cards travel over to Los Angeles and they play the Rams. There's a 55-point implied team, not implied. That's the Vegas total, 55 points. The Seahawks visit the Niners in an NFC West showdown, 52 points there. Devins Brown takes on the Minnesota Vikings, 52 points there. And then, of course, my Cowboys are hosting Sam Darnold and the CMC-less Panthers, and there's a 50.5 point total there. So a lot to like this week in terms of high point games. I guess the question is, where's the value? Because as I was going through in my prep for today, maybe a little bit at the wide receiver, and maybe you could take some reaches at tight end. But I think at least DraftKings has done a really good job pricing this week. This week 4 is going to be a challenge, especially for you cash game aficionados. So it's going to be interesting. Really fun week. And, as much as it kills me, I'd like to offer a personal welcome to the guy from Florida. Good to see you again. Anybody who's new to the show, this is the guy that used to get everything wrong before Phil was here. So, work with Devin and I this week if you don't have any compass for the Powergrid.
John's all about having people make him look better. So let's jump into quarterbacks. And this week is a bit challenging because the high-end quarterbacks all are in somewhat difficult matchups. You have Carson Wentz, who's likely to play. Tua is looking like he is out. Jacoby Brissett's taking on Indianapolis. Andy Dalton's out. Justin Fields looked horrendous. And then Lamar Jackson is something to watch because he didn't participate Wednesday or Thursday. And then the last time that Ryan was on this show, the Steelers were good, and that's no longer the case. Ben Roethlisberger didn't practice Wednesday, Thursday. I'm not sure that it matters all that much. But, Ryan, kick us off with who you're starting at quarterback this week. Where are you going?
Yeah, it's tough. And thank you both for the intro. One was better than the other, at least more kind. So I appreciate that, Devin. But yeah, so quarterback is tough this week. Like you guys said, it's there's a lot of high total games. So you want to start there, but then, what are we going to do at the running back and receiver positions? If you really want to go cheap, Justin Fields was that guy last week. I got to see a good game or two out of that entire offense before I go back there again. But Jacoby Brissett had a really nice day last week. I know it was a little bit aided by overtime, but he went well over 300 yards, I believe. He ran the ball well, and he's only 5,100 on DraftKings. So if that's the way you want to do it and get into some of the higher priced running backs and receivers that we're going to talk about later, that would be the low end guy that I would go with. if I had to go on the high end, I'd be looking at somebody in that Cardinals-Rams game, whether it's Kyler Murray or Matthew Stafford. Murray's going to get you that rushing upside. Stafford has that 300-yard bonus. If you're playing on DraftKings, he's got a lot of high potential for that as well, especially with that backfield. Darrell Henderson a little bit banged up, but the passing is the engine. The passing game is the engine for that offense. So that's where I'm looking if I'm going high end. But I'm real curious to see what you guys think as well, because it's either high or low. But boy, if you go high, it makes things tough. As John said, the pricing is pretty tough this week. So,
John,
Bill, what
where
are
we
you think?
going?
Or John, let's go to John, since he gets everything right.
Let's see, you're learning. It only took you 4 or 5 years to get there. The high end option. Look, the high end guys. Excuse me. The Patrick Mahomes, the Kyler Murrays, and Josh Allen's. Those guys are almost too expensive this week. They're almost pricing them out of cash game contention, in my opinion. Unless some massive value breaks tomorrow, that being Friday. I think you need to come down to the next tier, and for me, that next tier is Jalen Hurts going up against Kansas City. If you look at what the first 3 quarterbacks did against them, Baker Mayfield threw for 300 yards. Lamar Jackson only threw for 240 and a touchdown, but he also ran for 107 and 2 touchdowns. And then Justin Herbert last week threw for 4 touchdowns against this same team. Jalen Hurts looks to me to be fairly priced at 6,900. If I'm spending down, my model's telling me to go with, and I'm not recommending this. I'm going to say it up front before you guys start putting up Black-Eyed Joes in the red color. My model's telling me it's Justin Fields, but I can't do it after what we saw last week. He just looks so bad against Cleveland. And in fairness to Justin Fields, Cleveland's a really good defense, and we'll talk about whether or not he's in contention for GPP play. But on the lower end, if I'm going in cash games, it's Jimmy Garoppolo going up against Seattle in that game I talked about at the top of the show, 5,600. He's got some decent receivers in, Deebo Samuel and obviously George Kittle, and there's some questions in that backfield. So I think he fires quite a bit this week, and he's only 5,600 on DK. Those are my 2 cash game plays.
Yeah, that's an interesting call on Jimmy Garoppolo in cash games because I had him circled for GPPs. And I guess the question is, does he have the ceiling? And so far this year, he doesn't. He could certainly 3X. What is he on DraftKings? I think like 5,600.
Yes.
Yeah, so that makes sense for cash games. The question is, can he go higher? Personally, my thought is that he can. We haven't seen it so much this year, but the last time that he was healthy in 2019, he went over 30 DraftKings points in 3 separate games. Niners have a 27-point implied team total. They've got no running game to speak of. And I do love his pass catchers versus Seattle. We'll get to that. So I think he could be sneaky because even if he is a cash game option, I don't see him really attracting the crowd's attention in tournaments. Besides that, for me, I think you've kind of got the roster percentages. I mean, they're going to be flat at quarterback. They usually are, but I think the most roster percentage is going to concentrate in either the upper tier where you have Mahomes and you have Josh Allen playing Houston. I think people are going to want to play them. And that, I think, is going to leave Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson in that same top tier with a little bit less ownership. And then I think that in that 7K range where you have Hurts, you have Dak Prescott, and you have Matthew Stafford, I think that's going to shade Russell Wilson a little bit. I think from a leverage standpoint, I don't mind Wilson on the other side of that game. And the last name that I have written down here is one that Devin would throw a red Black-Eyed Joe on if he still had one, and that's going to be Baker Mayfield. He says no every time I bring up his name, and I got to love it.
How many bad games does he have to have in a row?
So here's the thing. Baker Mayfield I see as in a pretty similar spot to Garoppolo. The team total's about 27. The defensive matchup is about as inviting as it gets against Minnesota, who's just been getting torched by everyone. And Baker Mayfield's big games, because the Browns just don't pass a lot, they're always efficiency driven. And he does get up to 30 plus points at times. It happened in a couple of instances last year. And if you look at how efficient Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and Russell Wilson have been against that Minnesota defense, I think with Odell Beckham back, if it's ever going to happen in the year 2021, I think week 4 might be the time for Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, so from a cash perspective, I'm looking at Dak Prescott at 6,700. This Carolina defense, we were talking about it before the show, but statistically they look unbelievable. But they faced Davis Mills, Zach Wilson, and John, who was the third one?
Jameis Winston / Taysom Hill.
When they had like 2 coaches.
Yeah, when they had me coaching from the sideline.
Yeah.
You're always right.
Well, I wasn't that day.
They had the fan-controlled football league or whatever that was, where the fans voted on the plays. Yeah, I mean, how good is this Carolina defense? Because they've been terrible for a long time. Are they all of a sudden like a juggernaut? I don't think so. I think Dak at 6,700 is simply mispriced. I do for GPPs. I'm going to go back to Sam Darnold. I do like him at 6,000 against this Dallas defense that can't stop anybody. So I'm really intrigued by that game. The other guy I'm going to throw out there, and he might be in the Ben Roethlisberger washed territory, but that's Matt Ryan. And one of the biggest surprises of this year is this Washington secondary. I think they're statistically the worst in the league. They have no pass rush to speak of. Chase Young doesn't have a sack. They have 4 first-round draft picks: Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, and I forget the fourth guy. But they have no pressure. They're like the Titans last year, where quarterbacks just have all day to throw. It's risky, but you could stack him with a Kyle Pitts or a Calvin Ridley. If there was ever a breakout game for this offense, it could be this week. And then both RotoGrinders and Footballguys have Josh Allen by far as the highest rostered player. So Footballguys has him at 17%. RotoGrinders has him at about 15% on DraftKings. What do you guys think?
Well, I had a question about Allen too, so I'm glad you brought him up. What's your reason to not play Allen? Is it game script because they're going to be winning by too much, or is it price too high, or maybe GPP? Is it ownership?
Well,
talk me out of him.
Look, they're going to score a lot of points. The question is how much of that is going to be Josh Allen, and does he come out of the game at the beginning of the fourth quarter? I don't know. He's $8,000, so he's got to get you 30 plus points, and he's got no reason to run. You can just feed Zach Moss, you can feed Devin Singletary, and from my perspective, he's just not a great GPP play this week because they priced him up. He's got FanDuel pricing on DraftKings, so I just don't. I don't like him this week. And Devin, I'm going to come back on your cash game play with Prescott. Obviously, I Cowboys fan, so take it for what it's worth. The issue there that I have is whether or not the Cowboys have given up some decent points, but they played some pretty good teams up until now too. They played Tampa Bay, and then they played the Chargers in weeks 1 and 2. And last week they ran all over the Eagles. The Eagles scored a BS touchdown at the end, which we know. So I think they give up only 14 points before that. I think the Cowboys could run rampant over this Carolina Panthers offense this week, and maybe Prescott doesn't get there. I love Darnold as a GPP play, and we'll talk about that later. But in cash, I think it's a bit risky.
It's fair. So it sounds like, just to recap the position, it sounds like Jimmy Garoppolo in cash for John and Phil.
For me, Garoppolo is more of a tournament play. You know me, I don't really play cash games, but I think if I were, I think Jalen Hurts would be my guy.
So it sounds like Prescott, Garoppolo, Jalen Hurts. Ryan, did you have anybody that you were targeting?
I mentioned Brissett if you really needed to go really low, but you guys made more compelling cases on Prescott and Hurts for me for cash.
I'm fine with that. So if you haven't liked the video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell. You'll get notified, all that. You guys know this spiel. Every YouTuber says it by now. We're not going to pretend that we're professional hosts that stand box jobs. So let's jump into the running back position. Phil, what do you got?
There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of moving parts because of the tight pricing. There's kind of a lot to consider in every tier. The guy that jumped out to the top of my list was Alvin Kamara, and I don't know how to feel about it. So I'm interested to get some takes on that. On one hand, it's Alvin Kamara. He touched the ball 27 times last week. He got back in the end zone, and it seems like the Saints are going to ride him. On the other hand, that Saints offense has been just so bizarre all season long that you really don't know what you're getting with them from week to week. So I don't know.
Or is that just like week 2, they had no coaching and no one making decisions? Like week 1 and week 3, Kamara looked great.
Yeah, but week 1 they threw 5 touchdowns on like 15 completions. There's been some weird stuff going on. Yeah. And plus with the 2 quarterbacks, it's always weird,
It's just been crazy unpredictable, and I don't know that I like the game environment there. It's a 42-point total. The Giants have no receivers, so even though my regular kind of first look at point per dollar really jumped Kamara up there, I don't know if I'm going to be using him all that much. Just curious, before I'll chip in a couple of other guys at the end, but do you guys see Kamara getting popular in tournaments or cash games this week?
I think he's the most popular running back this week.
You do? Okay.
In tournaments, yeah.
That makes him a tough call. That's one of many things that makes this week difficult. So it sounds to me like I'm probably going to hedge and come in with like 3/4 of the field on Kamara or something like that. GPPs, I've got my eye on Ezekiel Elliott. I think John mentioned that Dallas might be able to run on Carolina. And I think that Prescott, Amari Cooper looks underpriced. And then, you're going to have in that game a lot of roster percentage concentrate on Chuba Hubbard, on DJ Moore. And it seems like Elliott might go overlooked because people have this perception that either A, he stinks, or B, he's locked into this timeshare with Tony Pollard. But Elliott looked great last week against Philadelphia, and if he has a similar game where he ends up the one that gets the ball near the goal line and runs a couple in, he could spoil the party again for that entire Dallas passing game, which I think is going to be pretty popular. So I do like him, and then I'll give you really quickly one more super thin GPP play. It's going to be really hard to click on this name because he had 2 carries last week. And that's Miles Sanders, who is going up against Kansas City. And certainly the potential is there for him to experience a similar game script that scripted him out of the game last week against Dallas. And that's going into Arrowhead as a big underdog. But I think this is a very specific play. He would be a run back in my Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and or Tyreek Hill stacks, because I think if you're counting on that stack to hit, you need the game to be competitive. And I think if the game is going to be competitive, it could probably only be because Miles Sanders breaks a couple of explosive runs, which he's proven capable of doing.
So one running back that's out there, and I think he's going to be the most popular this week, is Derrick Henry. And the reason there, and we'll get into wide receivers in just a minute, Julio Jones and A.J. Brown are looking iffy, maybe doubtful. John, what are we doing with Henry?
Well, I mean, if those guys end up doubtful, you have to play him in cash games. And he's on my cash game list, independent of that. And he was the one guy. Phil asked a very specific question, and I think Kamara, at least as of Thursday night, is the most popular running back this week. That said, the one running back that can challenge him for that title is Derrick Henry. If excuse me, if however AJ Brown and Julio Jones are both inactive, I predict that Derrick Henry's percent rostered is going to go north of 28%, probably hitting that 30% mark. And at 8,800, and I hate fading Derrick Henry because we've seen what he can do, but I'll be fading him if he gets there. I think probably the highest I'm comfortable rostering Derrick Henry this week based on his current projections is somewhere in the neighborhood of low 20%. So if he gets above that, I'm definitely going to come lower, probably in the 10 to 15% range.
It's almost like it would be better if those wide receivers played but were hobbled.
Yeah, agreed.
Because the roster percentage would be lower. The defense still has to respect Julio and AJ Brown. I worry 10. I mean, how many guys are they going to put in the box? 10? If Henry's
the sad thing is the guy still might run over them.
But then he gets through the box and he scores a 75-yard touchdown. So
yeah.
I mean, AJ Brown's not going to play. I don't think. I mean, it's a hamstring. Dr. G 2 weeks at minimum. So I don't think he plays. Julio's on one of his mystery injuries. You know, he's had the Kawhi Leonard load management. Shout out to the NBA. He had that treatment last week. No one really knows what's going on there. So we'll get to more kind of ripple effect of that, I think, in the wide receiver bargain bin section here in a couple of minutes. But I think you have to play Henry in cash. Like, how are they going to score points? He's going to get the 100-yard bonus. They're a huge favorite against a bad team. He's super expensive, obviously, but Phil laid out kind of reasons to play, but also not to play Alvin Kamara. And so, if you just want kind of your guaranteed, you're getting what you're getting, floor plus a ceiling, Henry's that guy this week, I think.
I don't disagree with you, Ryan, but I think the thing we're going to have to think about as we go through the show is telling viewers and listeners where the value is this week.
Yep, or Darrell Patterson.
The problem with Cordarrelle Patterson is you have to waste the running back position on him, right? And you really don't want to do that because where running back is concerned this week, who are you going to run beside Derrick Henry in cash? I mean, I said I think that maybe Kamara is in play. The other person who I'm looking at is David Montgomery against Detroit. He's 5,800. He comes out pretty high for me. He's a guy that when they have a good game script, and I knew Phil was going to do this. Phil put up the red black-eyed Joe for those of you on the podcast. That when they have a good game script, David Montgomery is the guy. And this week they're 3-point favorites going up against. Of course, I can't find it. Oh, Detroit, who's not done anything to really stop the run this year, and that's as low as I want to go in cash games. But Phil, give me the reasons why he's not you're not even qualified to give me crap on a cash game play. You don't like him for tournaments, but go ahead.
Well, here's the deal. That game should just kind of be scratched off the slate, in my opinion. I wouldn't be going anywhere near it with the exception of maybe DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson because those are actually good players. I mean, that offense, the Bears offense, is just mired in disarray. I'm not going near it personally. I think if you needed to pair someone like Henry, who I don't particularly love, by the way, even if those other guys are out, I wonder if the offense sputters. They're on the road. The Jets defense is good by the numbers, and the Tennessee defense is so bad that they might be bad enough to let Zach Wilson do some things. We don't know yet. It's kind of going to be it's going to be like the resistible force versus the movable object. We don't know which way it's going to break there. So I think if I was going in the David Montgomery range, I think I'd rather look to Clyde Edwards-Helaire a little bit cheaper. And I don't know that I hate Chuba Hubbard at 5,900 at $100 more, and what should be a game environment that's much more conducive to fantasy points.
John, you waved the both signs there, which usually means you got something.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly chime in on the game there with DeAndre Swift. Phil is he has a secret crush on DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor, so everybody on the show should know that. And I just wanted to point out that I only have 4 guys as of Thursday night. By Saturday, this list matures, but 4 guys that I'm going to fade this weekend. And DeAndre Swift is my only running back. So I not only think that's a bad call, but it's a guy that and Devin, what are our numbers on DeAndre Swift in terms of percent rostered this week? Can you pull it up quickly? Do you have it?
13.5%.
Yeah, that's way too high. If he gets above 10%, it's too high. And I'm urging our viewership to go below that. I think he's a terrible play.
Big news story today where Dan Campbell said you're going to see a lot more of DeAndre Swift as well. So that's not going to make it go down.
He bit someone's knee off, apparently. Or whatever quote that Dan Campbell was saying his team was going to do. What about Najee Harris? Haven't heard his name. I think he's cash viable, maybe.
Here's why I don't love it real quick. Deontay Johnson was a full go in practice today. And I think a lot of what you saw last week with Harris being used as a pass catcher at an absurd rate was them not having Deontay Johnson to kind of use as an extension of the running game on those short throws. So I don't know that we're seeing 19 targets again.
Well, we're definitely not seeing 19. That was outlandish. But we may not even see double digits. Juju Smith-Schuster left that game early as well. He of the 3.5-yard ADOT so far on the year. So that Najee Harris got a lot of targets due to game script, due to 2 short receivers being out, and no one else to be able to just really fill that void. So definitely not 19. I would take the under on 10 targets, and they're going to be losing the game again. I'm a sad Steelers fan at this point, but I'm not certain I want to play Harris. The price is still fine if you're talking about running backs that do have a chance to get 10 targets. It's a good price, but I think you can do more in other places there.
So who are the cash game plays then? Because I'm not hearing anything other than
Derrick Henry.
Yeah, Derrick Henry at 8,800.
Yeah,
for me, and I haven't went yet, but I'm looking down the board a little bit. So I think if you play Derrick Henry, it's contingent upon what we talked about, A.J. Brown and Julio both being out. For GPPs, I like Derrick Henry either way. But I'm looking down the board a little bit. And I just can't convince myself to play some of these wide receivers that we're going to mention here in a minute to form an actual team. I mean,
we're going to have to form some team.
We're talking like Nick Westbrook and these just random guys. So I'm looking at a Myles Gaskin at 5,300 going up against a Colts defense. I know. He looked better last week. I think that the no Tua factor helps Gaskin, helps him have more of a role in this offense. David Montgomery is fine, but it's really tough this week. One guy that I will mention on FanDuel that I like quite a bit, and I'm just pulling up his price right now, at 8,000 is Nick Chubb as a GPP play. I don't like him on FanDuel or on DraftKings just because he never catches passes, but I think this could be a 2-touchdown week for Chubb. I mentioned Hunt last week as more of a play. Chubb does more of the downhill running, which the Vikings have had a number of linebacker issues. Anthony Barr's been banged up. Eric Kendricks has been hobbling around, which those are 2 of the better linebackers in the NFL. So I like Chubb to rush up the middle here quite frequently, potentially could break a long one. But if we just go back to cash.
So you're playing Myles Gaskin over Clyde Edwards-Helaire for $100 more?
Yes.
Okay, I would not.
Yeah, I'm with Ryan on this one, but I think what we're hearing right now is that cash games are tough on DraftKings this week. We're running a bit late here, and I want to make sure that we get to the GPP side of things. I'm going to list a couple guys that come out strong for me, in my initial run of the model today. I was surprised to see Chase Edmonds comes out really highly rated for me on my model. He's had in increasing weeks 4 catches, 5 catches, 7 catches in an offense that this week could stand its biggest test against the LA Rams in a game that I talked about at the top of the show, 55 points in Vegas. And he's looking to be on, I've forgotten exactly how many rosters, but it's really low. It's less than 10%. Other guys, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's been talked about maybe in cash game contention. I think he's a GPP play this week. I was really surprised, and I'm not sure that I love it, but I'll share it for the sake of transparency. Saquon Barkley came out high in my model in that first run against the New Orleans Saints, as did Mike Davis, who I don't think is a good NFL running back, but his price is getting to a point where he's starting to become GPP viable at only 5,100, and I'll stop there.
How much last year data or historical data do you have in there for Saquon? Last year he didn't play, but
yeah, I mean, last year it's going to be a bit skewed that way for for this year in terms of historical data. Why? What do you want to get at here?
No, I just don't think he looks like the same player.
I agree.
Yeah, but what you said about Phil with Jonathan Taylor, the opposite is true of Devin with Saquon Barkley. 2 years ago I was on the show and I still remember that. So he's a Saquon hater, which is fine. Saquon's a 24-yard carry, then -1, -2, 1, 2, right? That's how he averages 4 yards a pop, right, Devin?
Yeah.
That said, his usage has gone up markedly in all 3 games here so far. So he's back to a high market share guy at the very least. Okay. Receivers?
Do we have to?
I mean, I think we do.
All right, let's break down the injuries real quick.
Yeah, the injuries are many.
AJ Brown, hamstring injury, looks like he's going to miss. Julio Jones, game time decision. Deontay Johnson looks like he's going to be able to go. Other side of the story for Juju Smith-Schuster, doesn't look like he's going to go, maybe. But Deontay is definitely going to play. Russell Gage looks questionable. Sterling Shepard is questionable with the hamstring. He looks kind of doubtful. Any others Darius Slayton, so the entire Giants' top 2 receivers. I mean, this is a mess. And then Jamison Crowder is a game time decision as well. Where are we going, guys? Help me out.
Well, I mean, we can talk about this, but you mentioned Sterling Shepard, Kenny Golladay, and Darius Slayton. Does that help or hinder the case for Saquon? Not to go back to running backs, but it is relevant to what we just talked about.
It can't hurt, can it?
Because the guy caught 6 passes last week, and he's only 6,700. I don't know. It's an interesting thought, and obviously we'll have to monitor what happens in practice on Friday. But to me, volume means a lot in GPPs, and so I still like the Darius call. While I've got the floor, I'm going to tell you my favorite wide receiver of the week is DJ Moore against Dallas at 6,600. He's going to be a lock in cash games, like the first person I click. And for GPPs, it depends on how high he gets in terms of percent rostered, but it's going to have to get pretty high for me to come off of him because I have his opportunity in terms of getting to GPP value, the absolute highest on the week at 22%. So he's my
0.2.
Yeah, I'm going to be way over that if it doesn't climb, and I suspect that it will for what it's worth, because typically what happens is as the week goes on, people start to get on these guys that are statistically more relevant. Other cash game plays, because I feel like I've been talking a lot and I don't want to hog. Deebo Samuel, Amari Cooper, Robert Woods, and then if you need to go low, the guy I like in cash this week is Darnell Mooney at 3,900 against Detroit.
Listen, it's ugly out there, right?
I can't do Mooney, but I don't want any part of this Bears passing offense. If I'm going to go low, it's probably a Tennessee receiver. And then I feel safer with Chester Rogers.
First time anyone's ever said that.
That's the first time that's ever been said by human beings.
Yeah, I mean.
So, but in all seriousness, what about the usage last week? I know it was mid-game. A.J. Brown got hurt, but Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, is that how we pronounce his name? You're a Big Ten guy, Indiana, right, Devin?
Yeah, Indiana.
78%
he was just Westbrook
of snaps.
at Indiana, I think. So.
Oh, well, he's hyphenated now, so he's got that going for him. 78% of snaps and ran a route on 81% of dropbacks. So that's pretty good, better than Chester Rogers.
Yeah, but I mean, how much does that matter, right? So
some
in game. I mean, look, 3,300 versus what's Westbrook?
3,200.
Yeah. You could play either one of these guys and just hope that they catch 4 passes, and that's how you fill out a lineup. I think that they're both in play. I don't know. I look back at the Indianapolis days, and I think that there's more there for Chester Rogers. He's more of a veteran than Nick Westbrook. So I'm going that way as of now, but my God, is it scary.
Let's have cash game plays because a lot of scariness. You got to take a stand here.
I'm taking Chester Rogers as of Thursday night. If A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are both out and the weather is okay, and let's caveat this every possible way.
And your Sunday morning coffee tastes right and all that stuff.
Going down the board just a little bit, Jaylen Waddle's interesting at 4,900 for a cash game play. I like this offense. You say I'm a Saquon hater. I'm also a Tua hater. Jaylen Waddle caught 12 passes last week, and first-round pick. I thought he was the best wide receiver coming out of this class. Didn't play last year because of an ankle injury, but tore Ohio State up in the national championship game. So I really like Jaylen Waddle. I think his price at 4,900 is simply too low. Robert Woods, 53. I don't know if we can do it, but the price is this is one of those sucker plays that I'm going to be the sucker. And the guy has not been good this year at all. But at some point, Cooper Kupp's regression is coming. Yeah. He's not going to break every NFL record. He's not going to be the number one overall, and not just wide receiver. Overall, he has more fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes right now, which is crazy. So there's going to have to be a second guy that's going to stand up. Van Jefferson's caught a few long touchdown passes that have been a little fluky. And then the last guy I'll throw out there for cash is Amari Cooper. 6,000 is just too good of a price. I talked about playing Dak earlier. I understand the concerns about potentially being a blowout, but they're going to have to score points to get there. So for me, it's Chester Rogers, Amari Cooper, Jaylen Waddle, and Robert Woods. As a GPP play, go finish cash, and then let's jump into GPP.
Yeah, I've got one more to add. If Robert Woods isn't your cup of tea for whatever reason, $100 more. Michael Pittman from Indy at Miami, 32% and 35% of Indy's targets the last 2 weeks. If he had scored 1 touchdown, let alone 2 with that usage, I think he'd be priced higher and more popular. And just a shout out to the site here. Adam Harstead writes a article called Regression Alert, which did mention Pittman and a number of other receivers in terms of yards per touchdown ratio. So Pittman is due for some touchdowns based on that metric, according to Adam. And so if you want, you're not going to get over 30% of a team's targets for 5,400 very often. So just wanted to throw him out there.
Yep, really like the call there. I don't know. You guys could go ahead and bet on Cooper Kupp regression. I'm not going to be doing that. His price has climbed, I guess, to the point where now it's worth a conversation. He's not as glaringly mispriced as he was. But, I mean, that Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford offense is humming. Stafford leads the league with 10.8 adjusted net yards per attempt, and he is targeting Kupp all over the field. It's been unstoppable, and I don't see anyone on Arizona who could cover Cooper Kupp. So I'm going back to the well one more time. I think I'm going to have a lot of Cooper Kupp again. until he proves me wrong. And I'm getting a little nervous because some of the guys that I hear you guys mentioning for cash, I really like in tournaments, and that's never a good sign. I think that Jaylen Waddle has a ceiling that he hasn't shown yet, right? The guy is electric with the ball in his hands, and it seemed pretty clear to me that without their starting quarterback, the plan in Miami to manufacture offense was let's get the ball to Jaylen Waddle and hope he could do something with it. And that was despite Will Fuller coming back. So I like the idea of him again. I think it's another high volume situation. And if he is able to break a long run, and that Indianapolis secondary is pretty bad. I think they've allowed the sixth most PPR points to enemy wide receivers. I like Waddle's chances at 4,900. And then one of John's cash game plays, Deebo Samuel. That's who I wanted to stack alongside Jimmy Garoppolo in tournaments. My thinking was that at 5,900, maybe more people are going to be looking to play George Kittle if they're either doing a Seattle stack and looking to run it back, or if they are looking for pieces of the San Francisco offense. But Deebo Samuel, very quietly, a 35% market share of the targets over there in San Francisco. That's fourth in the league. And Seattle secondary has allowed 100-plus yards to opposing wide receiver ones in consecutive games. Justin Jefferson killed them after the catch last week, and that's Deebo's specialty. I like Deebo. I like Brandon Ayuk, who was back to a full-time role in that matchup. And other than that, that's about all I got on the list. I do agree with the DJ Moore chalk. I think that's a really good call, too.
Yeah, I think that DJ Moore is going to be probably the most popular play, as he should be, both in cash and GPPs. John, what do you got?
Yeah, just real quick. I think you guys hit a lot of the better plays. I wanted to touch base with you real quick, Devin, on, I was looking at updating my model a bit earlier. This is prior to your numbers coming up on percent rostered. And I'm curious where you have these Seattle wide receivers in terms of percent rostered this week.
So Metcalf I have at 8, Lockett I have at 6.
Guys, that's going to be the play of the week if they go off at less than 10%. Both of those players are tremendous value at less than 10%. I love them combined with, of course, Russell Wilson, which I've talked about multiple times on the show. My exposure to wide receivers drives my exposure to quarterbacks and GPPs, and that's a tremendous play in a game that could just literally go back and forth against San Francisco. I know Phil likes that game as well. Multiple ways to stack that one up. And, as a secondary stack, and I'll stop here on GPPs, it's a secondary stack. So you got your primary stacks, and maybe it is that game we just talked about. Maybe it's Russell Wilson double stacked with his receivers, and you run it back with Deebo Samuel. As a secondary stack, we talked about Tennessee and some of the cheap receivers there, or Derrick Henry. I'm going to give you an off-the-wall selection here in Braxton Berrios. It's for the Jets. Week 1, he had 5 catches for 51 yards. Week 2, he had 7 for 73. There's nobody there to catch the ball, and he's 3,700. Nobody's going to have him, and he comes up really high in my model this week. So he's my kind of off-the-wall, most obscure play of the week for GPPs and Millie Maker type tournaments.
Phil, any other guys that you want to mention?
I think I'm good.
Ryan?
I guess just we talked a lot about Carolina Dallas, but nobody mentioned CD Lamb. So maybe more GPP because for 100 lower you've got DJ Moore, and for 700 lower you got Amari Cooper. But for all the talk we did about Carolina pre-show and in-show here, they did allow 5 catches, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns to Corey Davis, and 9 catches and 112 yards to Brandon Cooks, who was being thrown passes from Davis Mills. So there's some meat on the bone there. I don't know. I'm not the GPP expert. I don't claim to be. I don't know what his rostership will look like. But if everybody's on Cooper instead, Lamb's the guy that's getting deep, I think. So
yeah, I think It's about half the roster percentage. So I have Amari at 21 right now, and I have CeeDee Lamb at 9. So it's a significant discount. And there's recency bias there too, right? So if Lamb looked good in week 1 and 2, struggled last week, and Cooper.
Lamb was 1 inch from a touchdown, 45-yard touchdown on that first drive too. So one last name I'll throw out there for GPPs, and then let's do a quick recap because we've thrown a lot of names out there. Chase Claypool looked really good last week, and with Juju banged up, I think Deontay Johnson's banged up. He had 9 for 96, Ryan, something like that. Yeah, he did. He looked like he was fighting a little something too, though, in terms of a hamstring or what. But I mean, my bigger concern with him is just, will Ben Roethlisberger hold onto the ball for longer than a second and a half to throw it deep enough to him? But
turnovers lead to the quarterback getting the ball back faster.
There you go.
And Phil always likes to talk about Green Bay's secondary and what they do to the number 1 receiver on the other side.
Yeah. Not to mention, I mean, Claypool put up those numbers last week on 15 targets. I think that tells you everything that you need to know if he couldn't get it past 100 yards.
Yeah.
Well, and Adam's article, the regression alert article, mentions Claypool there too as maybe due for some positive touchdown regression. So
I mean, he's 6'5". At some point, they have to get him the ball, but who knows? Okay, so let's recap this really quickly. So it sounds like unanimous is DJ Moore. John, it sounds like you like Deebo Samuel in cash.
Yep.
Amari Cooper. Guys you like? Amari Cooper,
Robert Woods, and Darnell Mooney on the lower side.
So we're aligned to DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, Robert Woods. I like Chester Rogers and Jaylen Waddle. Although Chester Rogers, I don't know. If you have to do it, do it. But I don't feel good about it. Clearly in the tone of my voice. But it's either pay down. I mean, roster construction. You really have 3 choices this week. If you're going with Derrick Henry, you're either going to fund that. You have to go with like a Jacoby Brissett or Jimmy Garoppolo, or you have to pay way down at tight end. There's not really a great way to do it this week. So that transitions into the tight ends.
I've got one way you can do it. I noticed today that Gerald Everett popped up on the COVID list. So Will Dissly's 2,600 and should be playing nearly every snap. I know, but what's 2.6 times 3? It's not a lot. So
this is why you haven't been on the show for 2 years.
you said you wanted to pay down tight end. So prior to Will Dissly, I mean, I've got more uninspiring plays where that came from. There's a lot of junk tight ends, and one of them will hit, right? At least in terms of like getting 10 to 12 points. We mentioned all the Tennessee receivers being hurt. Anthony Ferkser's coming back. He's 3,100. We mentioned all the Giants receivers being hurt. Evan Engram, at least used to be pretty athletic. He's 3,000. Mike Gesicki's 4,000. He saw 28% of Jacoby Brissett's targets last week for Miami. So these are guys that are not crazy expensive. And I don't think we can say crazy expensive guys in cash because of everything we've done in the prior sections, especially being the guy that said Derrick Henry earlier. I'm not going to be the guy that says Derrick Henry, Cooper Kupp, and Travis Kelce. I won't be that guy.
I mean, the comment section will love you. They're going to hate the Chester Rogers pick. That's okay.
Well, that's more just a you-me thing than the pick itself.
I gotcha. So tight ends, I just want to go. This is laughable, but this just tells everyone where the rosters are going this week. Roster percentages on Footballguys. Dalton Schultz, 12.7%, number 1. Evan Ingram, second, 11.2. Ferkser, 8.8. Then we have Kelce. Then we have Jack Doyle. This is an absolute train wreck of a position. And RotoGrinders has very similar numbers. I think they have Kyle Pitts up there ahead of Jack Doyle. But, this is a disaster. John, figure this out for me, please.
I don't know that I can figure it out, but I do think that there's some real value there based on what you said in GPPs. At tight end, it's the most volatile position outside of kicker, but we don't have to play kicker at least for the last 3 or 4 years in DFS. And because of that, I'm always a big fan of playing somebody who is extremely low priced at the position, unless there's extreme value, and then you can go up to a guy like Travis Kelce, who's destined for 100 yards basically every week. This week, there's not that type of value. I don't know, Ryan. You might have talked me into thinking about your $2,600 tight end. As painful as it is, if it allows me to get the less volatile guys like Derrick Henry and Hurts and so forth, some of those more expensive guys, I might consider it. Now, I'll tell you who I have in my notes here. George Kittle at 5,900. He's basically a wide receiver one in a tight end's position, and he's going up against Seattle in a game that we're pretty certain. I think one thing we agree on is this game should be high scoring. If he were a wide receiver, you'd pay probably $1,000 more for him. And the question is whether or not you can fit him into your roster, which is a different story entirely. The other guy who's a bit cheaper, Noah Fant against Baltimore, 4,300. Denver's losing receivers left and right. They lost Jerry Jeudy, and then last week KJ Hamler. So they're stuck with like Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton, who's really carrying the load. But Fant is still there, and he's only 4,300. So he's the guy that I would pay down for in cash games. Although I may consider Ryan's recommendation, even though the slack that Devin had given him about being away for 2 years.
Hey, listen, it doesn't have to feel good. It just has to fit in the lineup. And I think, but right. I mean, people say it all the time. Like the weeks where it doesn't feel good is probably the weeks where like the people that do the most research do better. Right. I mean, if if your lineup just fits right in, so does everyone else's, right? Whether it's cash or GPP. Yeah. So Devin called it though. I mean, and I think it's a really important point to point out at this juncture in the show, with those percent roster projections that you've just called out, with those terrible. I mean, who are they, Devin? I mean, Ferkser,
Schultz, Engram, Ferkser, Kelce, Doyle, Higbee, Pitts.
Schultz isn't even the most athletic tight end on his own team.
No,
and he's been good though.
I know, but still.
80 yards and 2 touchdowns last week is driving it up at 3,400. I think
routes than Blake Jarwin.
What?
He's running less routes.
Yeah.
Let me chime in with my tight end thoughts on that note, because I think if you're playing Dalton Schultz this week, you're absolutely doing it wrong. You're banking on touchdowns, right? And do you really want to bank on touchdowns when the guy is in a timeshare at his own position, when he's in the same offense as Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb? Seems to me like that's probably not the way to go. I would personally, I'll be forgetting about Dalton Schultz if he happens to be in the top 3 or 5 tight ends when it comes to roster percentage. I don't hate the call on Will Dissly at 2,600, especially given the way that roster construction breaks down. Russell Wilson throws to his tight ends. He likes Will Dissly. He's shown an affinity to throwing to him before. The problem with Will Dissly is that he was like never athletic, and then he tore his Achilles, and then he came back from his torn Achilles where he was even less athletic. And then he tore his like ACL and PCL at the same time, and now I'm not even sure if the guy could even run. I haven't really been watching Seattle.
This is enough Will Dissly talk.
But 2,600 and all the snaps, I think you could probably squeeze that into cash games. I wonder, given how terrible, how truly awful this position is this week, if Travis Kelce isn't the way to go in tournaments. He'll attract the crowd like he always does as a one-off play here and there or in Chiefs stacks. But I think just playing an $8,100 tight end this week is going to set you building your roster in a really unique way. And I think the gap between him and the next closest tight end might be so significant that you need him to win. So I like the idea of going with Travis Kelce this week. I guess maybe you could go back to T.J. Hawkinson, but he's a little expensive. I think he won't command much roster percentage because people got burned last week. He surprised me. He was in 29% of Millie Maker lineups in week 3, which was about twice as many as I had him pegged for, and I paid the price for that. I don't know, maybe Tyler Higbee as leverage off of Cooper Kupp. I'll borrow a term since this is also playing for the RotoGrinders audience. I'll borrow a term from Jordan Cooper, Blenderhead, who likes to say just play whoever you want, and that's almost how I feel about the tight end position this week. But I do think that that Kelce is interesting from a game theory perspective.
So 2 things real quick. So all of this talk is DraftKings specific that we've talked about for the tight end position.
Yes.
On FanDuel, do not play one of these crap tight ends.
Agreed.
The savings that you're getting on FanDuel is not nearly enough. George Kittle is 6,700 compared to like Dalton Schultz. Not a great example, but those tight ends are 5,500. So you're only saving like $1,200. You can find 1,200 on FanDuel pretty easily. Do not play this low end garbage that we're talking about on FanDuel. For cash this week, I'm probably going Evan Engram, and it like hurts my soul to do that. But with no Slate and Galladay's banged up, and who's the third guy there? Sterling Shepard. It looks like he's not gonna go. If 2 of those 3 are out, I think they're going to have to throw the ball to Evan Engram. If not, I'm probably going Jack Doyle over Will Dissly. I just can't get behind Will Dissly in a cash game environment at all. But that's sort of enough talk about tight ends. Let's jump into defenses. Where are we going?
Dallas versus Carolina in cash. Dallas versus Carolina, 2,600. Sam Darnold. I mean, who did we team up against? I mean, for the past 2 years, we went up against Sam Darnold, and all of a sudden he plays for Carolina, and they're 3-0, and we're crowning this guy as the
He doesn't see ghosts anymore, John.
Oh, of course, but
I don't think anyone's crowning him. At least Adam Gase isn't calling his plays anymore. But he's not an all-pro quarterback. I think.
And the Cowboys are earning 2,600. You need to save. You need to save at this. I mean, I talked about volatility. It's defense is certainly the most volatile. Dallas is the cash game defense for me. And as far as GPPs, I like the Falcons against Washington and Taylor Heineke. Yeah. Did I say it right the first time? Because I don't do that often.
I think you did. Heineke.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Kind of like the beer, Heineken.
Why wouldn't you spend 400 less than the Cowboys and play the Lions against the Bears?
Because I don't think that Justin Fields as bad as he showed last week. Yeah, he was bad last week, and I said that at the top of the show. But I think the Browns are a good defense. I'm not so sure that the Lions are.
The Lions don't have Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett coming off of both ends.
Yep.
Fair enough, but do you trust Matt Nagy to make the adjustments that he needs to make coming into this game for Justin Fields?
I watched the game, and then I was at the Bears game the week before. When Fields has time, he looks okay. The problem is against the Browns, he had about a second, maybe. It was like a turnstile. They couldn't block Myles Garrett to save their life. I think he had 5 sacks in that game. Detroit is no one close to that level. I think that he's going to have a little bit more time. I think they're going to check it down to Montgomery. I think they're going to move the ball a little bit better. Another week in the system. I tend to agree with John that I think in a GPP setting, Detroit's fine. But Detroit has their issues too, right? Jeff Okudah's out for the year. Their corners are pretty atrocious. I don't know. The other defense I'm looking at has been a little better than I think people have given them credit for. But at minimum price, the Jets are decent against Tennessee. And the theory there is, realistically, if Brown and Julio are out and they can shut down Henry, they could shut down this offense pretty easily. So it's a nice leverage play if you're not going to play Henry.
Yep. How about one that might be more of a tournament play because of price and situation? Or it might just be that I'm really down on my favorite team. But Green Bay for 3,300 home hosting the Steelers. I referenced earlier that Ben Roethlisberger doesn't hold on to it for a long time, so they might not get sacked a lot there. But at a certain point, Green Bay is going to get ahead. Pittsburgh can't score with them, and he's going to have to try to make plays. And the guy, I mean, he's a boulder back there at this point. He's not the extend the play Ben anymore. And so maybe he throws a couple picks. And either the Steelers surprise everybody and win that game, or they just get blown out. I don't know. I almost don't see any kind of middle ground there. Again, maybe that's just pessimistic fan talk, but Green Bay jumped out at me for that reason.
I'll buy that, and I think that along the same lines of paying up to be contrarian, the Bills are like 200-point favorites against the Texans this week, and David Mills, they're at home. I mean, I don't see a way that does not end very badly for the Texans. And given the way that roster construction breaks down this week, nobody wants to pay $4,300 for a defense. So that could really be a gift if you could get creative and build some upside and correlation into your lineups around the Bills.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Do we want to have any special thoughts? Any tournament thinking here? John, go ahead.
I'm breaking up, so I'm hoping that everybody can hear me. But you absolutely must look at Yahoo again this week. The first $3,000 I'm putting into play in Week 4 is going to be on Yahoo. They've got the NFL $1 million baller with $250,000 of overlay in this tournament. It's a $20 buy-in. And I'm going to mass multi-entry, 150 entries. In fact, I'm going to call my shot. I think I'm going to win this tournament this week. So you're probably playing for second place, but it's still a pretty good investment of your dollars. Get over there and get into Yahoo. It's half point PPR. Every other place you're paying 10% of your money to the house, and they're actually giving you, in this case, 25% of their money to play at their site. And if you're not doing this and you're a low dollar player, then you're throwing money away, quite literally.
Somebody's got to be John, so everybody play that contest.
He just called his shot, guys. He just called his shot.
Well, all right, Ryan, get us out of here.
All right. Well, we'll skip the GPP advice tonight because you guys got plenty here in the show, and we're well over an hour of goodness for you. So please make sure you go check out footballguys.com. All of our DFS content, all of our – sorry, Devin?
And RotoGrinders.
And RotoGrinders.com. Football Guys, all of our DFS and all of our season-long content is sharp and is great, and there's probably too much to consume in any given week. So check out the names you see on the screen here as for the authors you want to check. And another shout-out to Ryan Zamichelli, who writes Trend Spotting, which is the article I used to write. It's still quite good. It's definitely a lot better than when I used to write it too. So check that one out. So on behalf of Devin Knotts, Phil Alexander, and John Lee, I'm Ryan Hester signing off. Thanks for joining and thanks for being a football guy.